had a mom call me up, a single mom. And she goes, you talk a lot about raising men, and you talk about the importance of the male role model within a boy's life. She goes, I'm a single mom, which means I don't have the father there that I wish I did. What do I do? Is there anything I can do? And I said, I was raised by a single mom. Now, my dad was still involved with my life, but I got to see him 3 to 4 months out of the year, right? Not as much as I would have liked to, but my dad was a man that I admired. And so 3 to 4 months went a long way when you admire your father. What I told her was, you are going to need a positive male role model at some point in his life, because there are certain challenges that he's going to need to go through, and they need to be age appropriate challenges, but he needs to have somebody in his life that is basically challenging him to explore and to try and to fight and to get up when he fails, and to tell him to, hey, nobody needs your crying right now. We need to get the job done, right? Not to an inappropriate degree. It needs to be age appropriate, but that's important.
What do you mean by age appropriate?
I don't give the same challenges to my 19-year-old son that I gave to him when he was 7. Right?
Okay, understand. Yeah.
And the other thing too is it's important to realize the thing that I tried to convey to her was I thought my mom did an excellent job as a single mother, in part because when I was little, and when you're little and you're far more vulnerable, you want security, you want love, you want comfort, you want that bonding with both your parents, but your mother in particular. I said, but as boys get older, it's important to understand that we have a hard time feeling love apart from respect. Love without respect feels like pity, I think, to most men. And we don't want to be pitied. Like, dear God, if there's anything we don't want, it's to be pitied. I said, so as your boy gets older, one of the best things that you can do for that little boy is start to give him a little bit more responsibilities, a little bit more challenges. Have him carrying the groceries from the car. Have him, when he, again, age appropriate, when he's old enough, when you guys walk down the street together, he should be walking on the street side. When he acts in a way that is kind of calls out that protector and provider in him, reward him for it. One of the greatest compliments my wife ever gave me was one time she just stopped me. Man, this hits me every time I talk about it. She just stopped me. She goes, I need you to know that you have done an excellent job providing and being there for this family, and you make me feel safe. Brother, I am telling you that was the only compliment I needed for a year. It's not the only one I got, but right, it's all I would have needed, right? It's all I would have needed, because I get so much sense of that meaning and purpose from my faith and from, providing for my wife, providing for my children. And so I think a lot of it has to do with giving men challenges intellectually, physically, emotionally. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to take the same path, right? But I think there is something to be said for that fact of overcoming something that required great mental and physical strain to do. Because once they realize that they can accomplish it, especially if they've had to fail a couple times before they accomplish it, that's a mindset shift. And that mindset shift, even if it was something minor when they were 12 years old, that plays into other areas of their life. And so I think that's really important for both men and women, but I think a lot of times it manifests itself different in the examples that you use.
So that was something that people around these men could be doing to improve these men's lives. But what if you've existed for 18, 19, 20 years and you didn't grow up with a father figure, and you feel like yourself always going after these short-term pleasures, living a hedonistic lifestyle, and you're not where you want to be?
Yeah.
So what can you do for yourself to change, rather than maybe, the things around you, putting the blame, not blame per se, but responsibility on them?
One of the most empowering things you can do is actually take responsibility for your own actions. And I mean that even when you're not responsible for some of your circumstances. I put it into two, there's an overcoming mentality, and then there's a victim mentality. I have known incredibly wealthy, privileged people with a victim mentality. Their life will always get worse as a result of it, because they're constantly looking for somebody else to blame with respect to what's going on. I have seen other people that grew up in conditions where they were legitimately not responsible for the crap they went through, but their attitude to the whole thing was, how can I improve my situation? And that's not to say that they shouldn't be able to, to really talk and discuss the things that happened to them, but their response to the things happening to them was, what can I do different? When you adopt that sort of mindset, it changes the way you look at things. And the mindset change is what is so important. Now, what do you do with that? Once you take responsibility, what do you do? I think there's 5 categories for all of us. men or women. I think there's a spiritual component, there's an intellectual component, an emotional component, a physical component, and a professional component. So the spiritual side, I mean, look, this is a long debate, and we can have it all day long. But I think we're starting to see the resurge of this idea that what you think about God really, really matters in your life, whether you completely dismiss it, entirely, or you actually have a faith that you appeal to. Because what that does is it provides you an objective framework for truth and morality. And when you have an objective framework that exists outside of you, it's not just about what I feel like doing that day. It's not just about what gives me hedonistic pleasure. It's about the fact that there is a right and wrong, and I want to be honorable. That's incredibly important. The intellectual side, nothing prevents anybody from reading books, watching podcasts, listening to people that you admire and respect discuss ideas, because men should be intelligent. You shouldn't just be strong. You should be intelligent. The emotional component has to do with being able to regulate your emotions while at the same time not shoving them down so far that you're unable to actually demonstrate them in a way that makes sense. I remember there was this interesting interview where a man was explaining to a female psychologist, because you talk a lot about opening up with your feelings. He goes, well, I'm going to tell you right now, the women in my life are the hardest on me, not the men. My wife, my daughters, they'd rather see me die on top of my horse than fall off of it. He goes, what do you do with that? And that's a tremendous amount of pressure, because I never want to be seen as weak. And yet we got people, oh, you need to be vulnerable. I don't want to be vulnerable. So how do I deal with that? My wife said something once that really struck me. She goes, I don't need you to be weak, honey. I need you to be tender. And that was an eye-opening experience for me. And it wasn't that I was not tender with my wife and children, but it was this idea of trying to articulate, what does it mean to be emotionally mature as a man? Because there are some burdens that I'm supposed to carry. There's some burdens where I'm not supposed to stop everything I'm doing and have a good cry about it. I'm supposed to get the job done. I'm supposed to protect. I'm supposed to provide the stability, the calm in the storm for my family. How do I do that if I'm weepy all the time? I can't. So there is a degree of us compartmentalizing when appropriate in order to get the job done. The question is what happens when we go back into that box and pull it out and start talking about it? And I think some of that emotional maturity comes from understanding the difference between weakness and appropriate tenderness toward people that you care about, and then finding people that you can trust to discuss things with and to work out issues, because you want to be better for the people in your life that matter the most. The physical component, again, I regardless of where you are as a man or what your life goals are, some people are going to end up, working in finance. Some people are going to be, Navy SEALs. Those have different physical requirements, but the data is in, and getting out and doing physical exercise, lifting weights, doing stuff like that doesn't just have physical benefits. It also has intellectual benefits as well. It has enormous health benefits. So I think, again, to be the sort of man that can protect, that can provide, you want to be in the shape to be able to do that. And then finally, the professional. It has never been easier or cheaper to develop marketable skill sets. I think that is one of, there's so much trashing of the internet right now and social media and everything else, and for good reason, right? There's definitely harmful things that take place, but social media is neutral, right? It can be used for good. It can be used for ill. It has never been easy to educate yourself on a wide variety of marketable skill sets, and to be constantly looking at learning and finding ways that the things that you're learning, the capabilities that you're developing are not only beneficial for you, they're beneficial to other people. Because that's the beautiful thing about the marketplace. You really want to get wealthy, you do it by actually providing things of value to other people, and then they provide you value in return. And so looking for ways to actually do that and learning how to do it, never been easier, but it's a continuous process. So those are the 5 areas that I tell people, like, look, if you focus on these 5 areas, regardless of your circumstances, you are not going to be disappointed with where you end up. You're not going to be disappointed with the progress that you've made, even if it doesn't always yield the immediate returns that you want.
Yeah. And what do you say to the people who lack motivation to do that?
So this is where discipline and motivation come in, right? And there's a difference, right? It's great to be motivated. There are plenty of days I am not motivated to go to work. There are plenty of days I'm not motivated to go to the gym. There's plenty. So what happens then? Well, discipline takes over. So I think a large part of that is that if you're not initially motivated towards something, you always have something that you like or that you're interested in that, let's say, is more productive than something else. Scrolling through TikTok, right? Playing, Space Marine 2, whatever. Those can all be fun and entertainment. They're not necessarily productive. So find the stuff that you do have some interest in that are productive, and start focusing on building habits and consistency with that. when I left the military, I didn't go to the gym for like 9 years. And when I hit 40, I was like, holy crap, dude, if I don't start making some changes, this is going to be bad.
What were the symptoms?
I was getting heavier. Yeah. When you go into legislative session in Virginia, we have a 60-day legislative session. You know what you do for 60 days? You sit, you talk, you read, and you eat. And you drink, right? That's what you do. That's what you do during legislative session. So we used to, I affectionately refer to it as our session baby, right? You get that little pooch that you get when you go on a cruise, but it's a 60-day cruise, right? That nobody wants to go on. But anyway, and I noticed I used to always be able to get that and then come home and I'd be working outside or tearing up brush or doing something and it would just fall off. And then I hit 40 and it didn't. I was like, okay, I need to start making some changes. And so I remember saying, okay, I have to now go through a lifestyle change. If I don't, there's going to be negative consequences. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to for 90 days. For 90 days, I'm going to do it. And here's what I found. Doing anything for a consistent period of time, 3 to 4 days a week, for that period of time, you end up seeing results. Whether it's reading more, whether it's developing capabilities, whether it's focusing on conversations, whatever it is, the physical, lifting, whatever it is, you see results. And then all of a sudden it becomes a part of your routine. And the next thing you know, you're far more motivated to do the thing that you actually have far more discipline to do now.
You mentioned of the 5 areas to focus on if you want to improve your life, one of them was physical fitness. Mm-hmm. And one thing Andrew Tate always says is if you're upset, you got to get a 6-pack and then reevaluate your own happiness. Do you think that that's like a reasonable thing to say? Do you agree with that?
I think Andrew's saying something that is incredibly catchy and easy to remember, but it also generates a lot of hostility, right? Like, how dare he reduce everything to a 6-pack? But if you think about what he's saying in that moment, he's like, go out and achieve something that is universally respected, right? Universally respected on a number of levels. Why? Because to get a 6-pack, you got to eat right. To get a 6-pack, you got to work out. To get a 6-pack, you got to be motivated and disciplined in order to do something that most people don't want to do. And at the end, you have something that is aesthetically pleasing that every woman on the planet likes. Now, once you've done all of that, chances are you're going to be in a better position. Are you going to be happier than when you were when you started that endeavor? Yeah, probably. So there's actually a lot of, I think there's actually a lot of common sense that goes into that statement once you break it down into everything that's entailed. Do I think in and of itself, like that's some sort
in
of
a vacuum that's like,
no, I think that would probably cure a lot though.
I kind of actually agree with that, but I agree it is a bit of like a catchy phrase that I would say is not going to yield the best results.
Well, let me put it this way. People gave Jordan Peterson crap when he said, clean your room. Right. But then you've also got the former commander of SOCOM, Special Operations Command, essentially saying the same thing in his book, clean your room. And what we're talking about is what is something that is an objectively good thing to do that requires some degree of discipline and habit forming behavior that you can look on and say, I set out to do something, I did it, it's done. Or now I have to maintain it. All of those things I think yield positive results. So even though it may seem simple, let's face it, if we're getting into a large philosophical discussion on all the various reasons and impacts on why you need to, or we can just say, here's a simple task, or maybe a difficult task, right? Especially, dude, I'm 45. I'm working on the 6-pack. That's a freaking difficult task. But I've been working on it, and I'm certainly happier for the endeavor. So I think sometimes it's about simplifying something down into terms that are accessible to people, and it seems attainable, right? It may suck to have to do it, but it's attainable. And giving people attainable goals is, I think, incredibly important.
Who would you say are people that the young kids should idolize that exist today?
Christ.
Christ.
Jesus is hard to beat, right?
Okay.
Perfection's hard to beat. But I mean that sincerely. I think that too many people have a very, very blasé Sunday school version of Jesus that doesn't even begin to explain the absolute complexity there. That is pretty incredible, actually, when you look at the actual courage involved. As far as like contemporary people that I know that I think are good role models, John Lovell. John Lovell runs Warrior Poets Society. He was in Ranger Regiment. I can't remember what Ranger Battalion, but he did some tours over in Afghanistan and has done some really interesting work since then. But he talks a lot about what genuine masculinity looks like. He's a big believer that, we sometimes when we overcorrect on trying to make men, we focus on the warrior without focusing on the poet. And so I think he's done a very good job of achieving that proper balance on what does it mean to be, yeah, as a man, you should be strong and you should be capable and you should be terrifying to threats and you should be tender toward your family and the people that you love. And you should be romantic and you should be, a poet. And what does it mean to do that and how can you accomplish that? So I think John Lovell is a very good example of something like that. There's other people that I really admire. Victor Marx. Victor Marx runs an organization called All Things Possible, and he fights against human trafficking. Why does he do that? Because he was horribly abused through most of his young life. Went off to the Marine Corps, dealt with a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. But now he gets out and he helps remove children from really, really bad situations. But on top of that, he talks a lot about his faith. He talks a lot about his journey. He talks a lot about overcoming challenging situations. And so these are guys that I think that people can respect for the fact that they are masculine in the sense that we typically think. That's a guy that can handle himself in a fight, right? But I think their view with respect to relationships, with respect to how a man should treat a woman, I think is vastly superior to what we get in some of the red pill environment.